This is Harrison from HPY Audio here, back with another video in the DAWs for Dummies series. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be covering reverbs, delays, and other effects. If you are new to this series, I'm breaking down and comparing all of the 5 major DAWs that you'd find as an audio producer, and taking each major mixing component and comparing them between softwares. Now the first question is, why are effects important? Effects are a vital tool for any audio producer, as they allow for audio signals to seem realistic and give them depth and dimension. Learning what effects to put on different audio signals is the key to unlocking your potential as an audio producer and a mixing engineer. This is why effects are so important. And all of the DAWs have different effects that are built in that have vastly different sounds and create vastly different overall mixes as a result of this. So it is important to know what the differences between effects from software to software are as you go into the world of DAWs. We're going to start out now with reverbs. What is a reverb? Now a reverb is almost like an echo. It is the effect that you get from any audio signal as it plays out or is amplified in a room. It is when early reflections of the sound hit your ears later than the overall audio frequency. So once the audio signal has finished, the reverb will continue to play and hit your ears later. This is effective because if you're recording different audio signals, a lot of the time you aim to remove any natural reverb you can from a recording, which means that once you mix, you want to add that reverb back in to place it in a space to create more effective signals that feel like they're placed in a dimension and in a space, because listeners tend to connect to a mix if it feels like it is naturally in a space. Delays are very similar to reverbs. However, delays play more on the echo of the reverb. A delay is when you set an amount of echoes, as well as the speed of the echoes, and how loud those echoes are. Now, if I say a word, that word will repeat over and over again and go down in volume for as long as I tell it to, and can also be as fast as I tell it to. This is different from a reverb because it mainly just uses the echo. Reverbs not only use the echo, but they also use reflections from the space. Delays just focus on the echo, which creates a very intricate effect that I think is just as important as a reverb. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of different effects that you might want to use. I think reverbs and delays are the ones that you should learn about first before diving into other effects, but some other effects that you might want to focus on are distortions, choruses, phases, flanges. All of these things are very important and very vital for creating overall tones and overall mixes that have a wide variety of interesting sounds. So let's go into the softwares and have a look at the reverbs, the delays, and also any other interesting sock effects that I think are worthwhile looking at for each and every software. Now, starting out with Pro Tools, I'm going to be showcasing the reverb that I've put on the vocals. I'm just using the stock Pro Tools reverb, which is called Reverb. I'm using a large plate, however there's a bunch of different settings that you can use. Now, a plate reverb is simulating the sound of the audio signal being reverberated through a massive metal plate. This is a very popular reverb form that they'd use in studios back in the day, as they'd house the big metal plate in one of the rooms and record everything through that. You can get this effect through digital plate reverbs now. So let's listen to what it sounds like with this on.
She knows I'm a rock star, got to go, about to go, hard, so come on.
Now there's quite a few settings for your reverbs. Your decay basically shows how long the reverb is going to last after the audio signal has finished. You have a high frequency cut here, which is basically just a reverb EQ, as well as a low pass filter. Your dry wet mix is basically how much of the reverb you want in the signal. 100% wet being you could only hear the reverb. 100% dry is no reverb at all. So you basically want to be able to listen out and get a good balance between your dry signal and your wet signal. This is what it sounds like 100% wet. As you can see,
We can do it anywhere, where you wanna do it.
The more you drag it to the dry side, the less the reverb is involved. I have it at about sort of the mid-30s here, as I think that's the best mix between the reverb and the dry signal. The different types of reverbs that they have, such as hall, church, and the rooms, are also very important to note, because halls versus plate reverbs are very different in how they sound. Halls are meant to be simulating a physical space, whereas plate reverbs are simply simulating a type of reverb that is used in studios. So depending on which one you prefer, you might want to place it in a roomy reverb rather than through a plate reverb. Alright, let's move on to delay. I'm using the Real Tape Delay, which is another stock Pro Tools plugin, and this acts just as a normal standard delay.
Go, about to go, hard, so come on, so.
Now your different settings here, such as your speed and your feedbacks, allow for your different inputs for the delay. Your feedback determines how long the delay is going to last for.
She knows I'm a rock star, got to go, about to go, hard, so come on, so.
The speed is the tempo in which that delay will start.
Where you wanna do it, we can do it anywhere, where you wanna do it, singing, car in your chair, playing at your dad's house.
Now these reverbs and delays are going to be really effective for creating that space and placing these audio signals in a dimension that the listener is going to be able to connect to. Now I would use reverbs on a wide variety of different audio signals. I think it's very, very vital to have reverbs on certain drums, such as your snares. I think it's very, very important to have it on any vocals. I think reverbs are very important to have on certain guitars as well, depending on the style of music you're creating. And I think delays as well have their place on a lot of these different stems. I believe that the reverb and the delay are very stock standard, and although they are very nice to use and very nice to set up, some of them might not be as effective as others. Now let's look at some other interesting effects that are built into Pro Tools that I like to use. The Air Bundle, which is included with a lot of different Pro Tools subscriptions, has a wide variety of different effects that are all really effective, such as choruses, filters, flanges, fuzz, phases, talkbox, and also some vintage filters. These are all really nice sounding and could easily be used for a wide variety of different things in your mix. Some of the other ones that I like to use are distortions and saturations. I like using the SansAmp PSA to create a really gritty, punchy distortion. These are effects that I think are really great packed into Pro Tools, and I think should be used in your mix to create a wide variety of different sounds. Now let's see what the reverb sounds like in Reaper. This is the Reaper reverb, which is called Reverberate. Now this is a lot different looking than the reverb you'd find in Pro Tools, and also sounds very different. It has a few different presets that are loaded onto the plugin. I'm going to give the live vocal preset a try and see how it sounds.
She knows I'm a rock star, got the black denim, got the guitar, yeah.
Now this is a very strange sounding reverb and very different to the one that's in Pro Tools, as this sounds a lot more like a delay than an actual reverb. I'm going to try some other presets to see if anything can capture that same plate reverb sound that I had in Pro Tools.
So, where you wanna do it, we can do it anywhere, where you wanna do it, singing.
I'm not a big fan of the stock reverbs that they have in here, as they don't really have for that same classic reverb sound that you can get in other programs. Now, this might have its place in certain mixes, but it definitely doesn't for mine, and I would highly recommend looking into third-party reverb plugins if you are looking to use Reaper for your mixes. Now moving to the stock Reaper delay, it actually has pretty much the same features as the Pro Tools delay. If we listen to it, it sounds like your classic, straight-up delay.
She knows I'm a rock star, got the black denim, got the guitar, yeah.
As you can hear, it sounds very similar to what it is in Pro Tools. This is just a classic, stock standard delay, and I'm sure you could use this in a very effective way on your mix, Now, Reaper doesn't have a huge amount of stock plugins, and the ones that they do have are very limited. It has a few of the stock plugins that you'd expect to see, but not many plugins in the way of deeper effects such as distortions, phases, flanges, and anything of the sort. I would highly recommend looking to third-party plugins if you're looking to experiment with different effects in your mixes if you are using Reaper. Now moving on to FL Studio, let's start looking at the reverb that FL Studio has. This is the stock reverb plugin for FL Studio, the Fruity Reverb 2, which I think has a very nice sound and actually has some very decent presets to choose from. Now it doesn't have the plate reverb that I usually like to use for vocals, but its presets are still very nice. Let's listen to what the Small Studio preset sounds like.
She knows I'm a rock star, got the boots on in the pool bar, yeah.
Overall, this is a very nice sounding kind of stock standard reverb. This is a lot nicer sounding than the Reaper one. However, it may not be as nice sounding as the Pro Tools one, which has a lot more different presets. However, this is perfectly fine for a mix. As you're learning how to mix using reverb and use reverb effectively, I think this would be perfectly fine for learning your way around reverb. It's visual, as you can see here on the left. It allows you to create your own room and shift the size of the room just by dragging and looking at the visuals. This is a perfectly fine plugin and will do everything that you need it to do as you are learning your way around reverb. This is the stock FL Studio delay, the Fruity Delay 3, which I think is a very, very nice delay. It has a lot of different options, which gives you a wide variety of sounds you can create with this delay. It gives you stereo delays, mono delays, a ping pong delay, which is one of my favorites, or you can have your delays off entirely and just look at your sample rates and your modulation. Now let's see what this sounds like with some of the different features that it has packed in.
She knows I'm a rock star, got the boots on in the pool, boy, yeah. She knows I'm a rock star, got the
Overall, I think this is a very nice stock plugin. This is going to be perfect for teaching new audio producers their way around delays and allows them to experiment with a wide variety of different options packed all into just one plugin. Now, FL Studio has quite a wide variety of effects packed into it. Has plenty of different reverbs and delays, has lots of different types of distortion, has lots of different types of filters, has lots of different types of other effects such as its choruses, flanges, and phases, and also has a wide variety of miscellaneous plugins such as vocoders and pitch shifters. I think this is very good for new producers as they figure their way around different types of effects and experiment with different sounds. I think this is a lot better than Reaper, for example, which only has the bare minimum in the way of stock plugins. This allows for new producers to really figure out what type of sounds they want, which is why I think FL Studio does a great job in introducing new audio producers to the wide variety of sounds that are out there in the way of mixing. Let's look at Ableton's reverbs. Ableton has two stock reverb plugins, which is the Reverb and the Hybrid Reverb. I have the normal reverb loaded up here, and one thing I've noticed is that it's actually fairly limited. It has a lot of options, but it doesn't have any presets. So if you're not a fan of the sound that it has already loaded onto it, it's hard to get a sound that you're going to be happy with. So let's listen to how the reverb sounds.
She knows I'm a rock star, got to go, about to go hard, so come on.
As you can hear, it's a nice sounding reverb, but it's very stock standard. After changing a few of the options there, it didn't really change the overall sound of the reverb. I think this would be perfectly fine for a new producer that is just learning about reverb. However, I think that with a few of the visual things on this plugin, such as the visual EQs, and some of the options being kind of differently named to some other reverbs, it might be a little bit hard for new producers to pick this up, especially because its sound is very limited as well. I do, however, like the hybrid reverb, which actually does have a lot of different presets with some very interesting sounds, such as the shimmer, tides, and prism presets. It has better options and has a wider variety of sounds, and I think if you're going to be using reverbs in Ableton, I would highly recommend the hybrid reverb instead of the normal reverb. Now, Ableton has a lot of different stock delays. I'm just going to load up the normal delay and see how it sounds.
I'm a rock star, you're a diva, and we are getting bad now, so come on.
This delay actually sounds quite nice, and changing a few of the settings allow for some quite nice delay sounds, such as using the ping pong delay, which is one of my personal favorites. I do think that the options are a little bit limited, however, especially comparing it to the stock delay that you could find in FL Studio. I do think this would be perfectly fine for creating an effective delay sound, and especially for teaching new users how to use delay, but it is maybe a little bit more limited than some of the other delays we've covered. Ableton has a boatload of different effects loaded onto it. It has lots of different types of distortion, lots of different types of modulation effects, it has pitch shifting plugins, and all of these effects I think are very, very solid. I do, however, think a lot of these effects are a little bit harder to use and harder to understand than what it is on FL Studio, for example, or even Pro Tools. But I think these are very effective and will give you a very, very great sound as you are learning to create effective mixes using this software. Now we're here in Logic, and I'm going to be showcasing the Logic Reverb and the Logic Delay. Now, unfortunately, just like in the last episode, I wasn't able to get any footage that had sound involved, but I'm still able to visually showcase these plugins, how they look, how they work, and how easy it is to pick up for new producers. So we're going to start here with the Reverb, which is the stock reverb for Logic. Now, as you can see, it is a very visual plugin. Although it doesn't have the plate that I'm so used to, it has anything from a room, to a chamber, to a theater, to a vocal hall. It has experimental presets such as Strange Rooms, Airy, and Bloomy. All of these sound great, and all of these have a fun visual aesthetic to go with the plugin, which makes it interesting for new users as they start learning their way around these. Now, the options that you have at the bottom might be a little bit limited, with only a few options to choose from, but when you have such a wide variety of presets, and also have a visual EQ to go with your reverb, as you can shape all of your EQ yourself just like you would on the channel EQ, this makes it incredibly interesting to use, and the variety of sounds that you can get from this becomes absolutely vast. Now here we have the Logic stock delay, which is called the Echo. It is very straightforward and it doesn't have a huge amount of variety, but it is still very solid and sounds very good. Now you can't set your tempo to a particular BPM, which is a little bit annoying. However, laying it out in a way that is musically relevant, such as the type of note that the delays are going to be hitting, is very useful and allows for new producers that might have more of a musical knowledge to understand it better. I do just wish that it had a little bit more options. However, it still sounds great, and it still is very easy to use for new producers. If you want to expand your sound in Logic, they have a wider variety of delay plugins. I like using the Delay Creator plugin, as this allows for you to create experimental delays that give your mixes very interesting experimental sounds, which I love when creating music in Logic. So that finishes this episode, which is about reverbs, delays, and other effects. I found that even though I'm the most used to Pro Tools and the effects you can find on it, I do think that the other softwares all have very nice effects that are very easy to learn and very easy to teach to new audio producers, especially FL Studio. I do think Reaper is very limited in its effects, and the effects are a lot harder to use and a lot harder to get a nice sound out of, which might limit the capabilities of new producers as they try to understand these effects as they try to create effective mixes. But overall, I think these softwares would be able to give you a wide understanding of effects and would allow new producers to experiment with these sounds and figure out how to use these to create effective mixes. The next episode is going to be the final summary for the series, and I'm also going to be showing how to bounce your mixes out from each software. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.